I did it. Good job, Shelly.
Well, first off, I appreciate the invitation and thank you for having us here today. We just wanted to get out there to prepare you back to the General Assembly here coming up in January. Congratulate each and every one of you for being here. Congratulations, Madam Mayor, and the new council members, and we're very excited. This administration is going to go forward. And as administration goes forward, there was a couple things that really resonated, I think, with me when we met at the legislative day, and I appreciate you folks being able to come that day. And it was a few things one council member, Alshar, spoke to specifically, and as well as you, Madam Mayor, was, as we go forward this together, we need to have a shared vision. And I believe that strongly, and I believe, I don't want to speak for Delegate Chan, but I believe that she echoed the sentiments that we have a unified front and a vision together. So as you guys are hoping to put forward your goals and initiatives and things of that nature, we would appreciate, having some input if something that's going to be state related specifically. We think that is critical as we're going through it. We're not working in our individual silos, but we're also obviously working together. And then the latter part was, our vision, but that you spoke to before, Mary. So we really appreciate you being here. There's multiple things that we've been working on in the past. I'm not sure exactly things that if you've had an opportunity to meet as a body yet, as far as what your goals and priorities and things of that nature are. But again, we would appreciate being involved in those, especially when it comes to state things. So really, I mean, that was pretty much it of just being able to have an opportunity to have any type of dialogue of any questions you guys may have for myself or for Delegate Cham as we head back to Annapolis here in January. Things there are going to look different, much as they have everywhere right now. A lot of the things in Annapolis be held virtually. In regards to committee hearings and things of that nature. But we're looking forward to get back there and obviously work towards all the good things we can bring back here for the city of Hagerstown. So, is there anything specific, I guess, that you guys wanted to talk about, or?
Well, just to give you an update, we have decided to do a community survey before we do our major goal planning session so we can get feedback from the community. So those questions are being finalized as we speak. We have a random selection of households across the city that's also been finalized. So hopefully we'll be able to send that out in the very near future and get them back by January so we can sit down, look at the results, and come up with a game plan, including feedback from the community. So we'll keep you updated as that process goes along.
The surveys actually bring up, I did have a question with that. Are you sending those just to city residents, or are you sending those to people outside the city, or what is the parameters, I guess, of the survey you're sending out?
It is just to city residents. And it's targeted population per quadrant of the city to make sure that we're getting a fair sample. Once those targeted results come back, we're going to open it up to everyone. So if you didn't get one in the initial mailing, you still have an opportunity to provide input.
Now, when you say everyone, still just city residents, or are you looking for any input outside of the city?
Well, once it's opened up, I mean, it's going to be hard to not have people from the city. People from Frederick or investors may comment. So there is going to be a questionnaire, part of it, that says, do you live in the city?
Okay. Yeah, the only reason I haven't asked is I think that as we're working together, I think obviously a lot of the things that we've shared in the past, we're trying to get people to come into our community and invest in our community. Whether they live here already, we're trying to bring people to the city of Hagerstown, whether it's to invest, whether it's to live, whether it's to visit our shops and restaurants and things of that nature. So I would think it would be helpful to have input both in and outside the city. Ultimately, obviously, city decisions are being made by you folks in the city, and well as our city residents should have the most input in that. But I think having the input of folks outside the city that we're, again, trying to attract would be beneficial throughout that process. Are you guys crafting the language on those questionnaires, or is that still a work in progress, or how's that being handled?
We have a draft that I sent out to the council today. I've been working with Captain Alexander at the police department because he teaches a class in this. So we submitted questions to him, and he kind of reformatted it in a way to make sure that they're not biased or the questions aren't leading people to answer a certain way. So right now I have it out to the council for them to take a look at, and we'll finalize it from there.
Okay. If anything's related, anything maybe state related, Again, if the courtesy could be extended to Delegate Cham and I at some point for any input, that would be greatly appreciated. But yeah. So.
Yes. Hi, Delegate Cham.
Hello, sorry I'm not able to join you guys today. Feeling a bit under the weather.
Oh, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
So I guess we just wanted to kind of hear from both of you guys too, if you had any priorities for the city of Hagerstown, you know, going into this legislative session and how we can help partner with you.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it goes back to the beginning of having that shared vision, and I guess that'll be a work in progress as you're gathering some feedback, obviously, from the new members and as you're putting the survey out. And I think that's a good thing to get, you know, some input from the citizens. I was just use that as a data point. You know, don't base all your decisions as based on one particular survey. But it would be good to put all this together. You know, we're coming off of, as we all know, the Urban Improvement Project, which was, you know, if not, well, it was the single greatest our largest revitalization effort in our community or in the city. And I'd like to see us, as we work forward and going together, to continue that commitment of investing in our city and continuing in our investment in not just downtown, but throughout the community, and really capitalize on all the things and the assets we have here, and be able to, you know, maybe put together another package of projects in the urban improvement, a UIP2, so to speak, whatever you want to call that, or whatever that may be called. But a couple different things there. I mean, we've talked about a couple different residential opportunities downtown, things of that nature, different things that are going on in the Jonathan Street community I think are very impactful, things on the east end of town, and things of that nature. So I know the conversation, Mayor, that you and I have had recently, I don't think I've ever been opposed to any type of development or investment in this city, and I would stand ready and willing to support any investment development opportunities I think that you guys would be able to come up with. So again, hopefully we're able to work together and kind of put a package together of things that are going to better our community and better the citizens here in Hagerstown. So,
Thank you.
Do you guys have any questions or comments for Senator Quarterman or Delegate Cham? No.
Thank you.
You too?
Yeah,
All right.
I think so.
All right.
Good to
well,
see you, Senator. Good to see you, Delegate.
yeah, so again, I mean, obviously we'll be in Annapolis starting in January, back and forth, but as you guys are having those goals and priorities, we would love the opportunity to be able to collaborate with you. So again, we could have that shared vision going forward. All right?
We'll make sure we get communication going on committee meetings and those kind of activities so that there's a need for us to want to provide testimony or anything, we can. It's going to be a lot easier to do now because that's all going to be virtual.
Correct.
So make sure we get that information out to you when it's appropriate.
Sounds good. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next we have fiscal year 20 audit presentation. Michelle Hepburn and Chris Lehman.
Good afternoon. So Chris is joining us remotely. Hello, Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And we do have some newer members on our council, so I just wanted to kind of take a couple minutes and just stop and reiterate. So every year, the city of Hagerstown has an independent audit completed, and we do that in conjunction with the preparation of our annual CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And in addition to doing the regular financial audit, we also engage S&B at the same time to complete a single audit. The single audit is more concentrated specifically on federal grant awards. And this year we were able to kind of incorporate and do both of them at one time. But I'm going to turn it over to Chris and allow him to walk you through all the findings that he has.
Okay. Did you all want me to share my screen? Because I am not able to do that at the moment.
So everybody, the packet, the entire audit presentation was available and was posted online on Friday, as well as everybody, all the members, I think, of council has their packet, has it in their packet.
Okay, I can just walk through it. I thought I was sharing my screen, but if not, I can just go ahead and go through the presentation. Everyone has it in front of them. Okay, so I'll start on slide 6 of the presentation. What that has is the scope of services that we were engaged to perform. As Michelle had mentioned, we were engaged to audit the June 30, 2020 financial statements of the city. That also involves reviewing the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which is it's not a requirement of the city, but it's a more prestigious award that the city completes for its financial statements that's submitted for an award program. As well, we've done the Uniform Guidance Single Audit, and that's required for any entity that expends more than $750,000 in federal funds per year. In combination with issuing those two sets of statements, which both have been issued, we also reviewed the Uniform Financial Report, which is a report that goes to the state of Maryland upon completion of the financial statements, as well as the data collection form, which is required by the federal government upon completion of the single audit. I would say this year with COVID and a lot going on, we've had lots of clients kind of extend their deadlines or kind of push the audits back, but both sets of statements have been issued. The original deadline's been met, so you're probably one of the few clients I have where both the financial statement and single audit have been issued at this point in time. If you look at slide 7, this is a summary of the results of the audit. We've issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That's the best opinion we can give under professional standards, as well as we didn't discover any instances of fraud. A financial statement audit's not a fraud audit, but we are required to have a skepticism that it could be perpetrated by anyone in it. Nor did we discover any material weaknesses in the internal controls, as well as we received the full cooperation of management, so any records that we requested support for or questions that we had, we got timely responses and adequate backup for those items. Just at a high level, and I have a couple more slides that walk through the numbers just in a tad bit more detail. But at a high level, for the city overall, there's a positive change in net position again for the 3rd year in a row. Net position increased to nearly $4 million for the year. That increases the city's total net position to roughly $203 million for the year. As well as we didn't have any audit journal entries, so that just speaks to the quality of the general ledger and the accounting system throughout the year, but we had no proposed audit entries through our audit. If you look on slide 10, as part of doing our risk-based audit approach, we look at the internal control environment, and there's 5 interrelated components that we look for in assessing whether or not there's an effective control environment. That's the control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, control activities, and monitoring. In each of those 5 areas, we concluded that the environment or those areas were effective for the period under audit. Starting on slide 11, and then this will continue into slide 12, we looked at certain key processes. We have treasury, estimates, financial reporting, and expenditures here on slide 11. And we concluded through the audit process that those processes were effective for the period under audit. As well on slide 12, looking at payroll, revenue, and fixed assets, those processes were also effective for the period. On slide 14, you'll see a 3-year comparison of the governmental activities and the business type activities that are included within your annual financial statements. In the governmental activities, total assets for fiscal year 2020 were at roughly $119 million. That compares to liabilities of nearly $94 million, and that leaves a positive net position of $28 million for the governmental activities. In the business type activities, total assets were at roughly $244 million. Liabilities were at nearly $70 million, and that leaves a positive net position for the business type activities of roughly $175 million for the year. On slide 15, you'll see a 3-year comparison of the entity-wide revenues and expenses broken down by both governmental activities and business type activities. Total revenues for the governmental activities for this year were roughly $50 million, compared to expenses of nearly $51.9 million. In the business type activities fund, that was $57 million of revenues compared to $52 million worth of expenses. From a single audit perspective, the major program that we tested for fiscal year 2020 was the Community Development Block Grant. That's roughly $1,083,000 worth of expenditures compared to all the federal expenditures of $1.7 million, which covered 63% of the total expenditures. And we had no single audit findings to report through our testing, so it was a clean single audit. The last few slides, I won't read through each point, and a number of these I hit on in the introduction, but if we had any difficulties getting through the audit, if there were audit adjustments or fraud concerns, we'd be required to bring that to your attention, and there's really nothing of a negative nature that we'd be required to bring to your attention through the audit. I've also included my contact information here in the back. That way, if there's any questions that anyone has, outside of audit season, I make myself available to really anyone within the city. And, as questions come up from Michelle and her team, we kind of like to deal with those real time. And, I make myself available really if there's any concerns or questions throughout the year to the council as well. I know I went through that kind of quickly, but are there any questions or items I can highlight as a result of the audit?
Any questions?
So to recap, he gave us kudos because we were one of those few clients who was on track and met the original deadlines and didn't ask for an extension because of COVID. He has given us kudos for our very well-defined policies and structures that we have in place in our internal controls, and no audit findings. It's great.
Thank you.
That's a great report card for the finance team.
Actually, I think there's one. Go ahead.
I just have one
Okay.
question. I know that when you submit these audits, that typically if you take federal money, you have to do additional tracking and paperwork. Is the CARES funding going to add to that to any significant degree that you've seen in the jurisdictions you're representing, or are the feds sort of, letting it slide a little bit, I think is probably the easiest way I can say it.
I think from what I've seen, it's going to definitely add to the original recipients. So from the standpoint of the city, I guess we were extremely lucky that we weren't directly awarded the CARES money, but any monies that we're getting, we're receiving it as a sub-recipient. But Chris, do you want to add to that a little bit? Because I know that it's still federal sources, there's still all the regulations. Technically, I guess there should be sub-recipient agreements in place with everybody they're passing monies through, but
Yeah, and
again,
whenever you get federal dollars, there's always, there's a fairly administrative burden to be in compliance. And the unique item with the CARES funding is that it came out so fast that the audit rules are actually still being written. And it's not, it's typically not common to say, all right, here's the money, and then we come up with the rules kind of as you go along. But the money came out so fast, so we're still getting guidelines on the audit rules. But the U.S. Department of Treasury has been putting out FAQs and guidance kind of as you go along, and it's being spent. So there is guidance for local governments and state governments to follow for anyone that's spending the money. But yes, there is administrative requirements and administrative burden to it. But the city's used to receiving federal funds, so it's nothing foreign, or I think too outside the box really for the city to comply with. Michelle may feel otherwise, so I don't want to speak for her, but it's kind of a lot of the traditional type requirements that you would expect that you would have to have for compliance for these for the CARES funding.
So again, the positive for me is that we weren't the original recipients. The county and the county health department The bad news for Mr. Jonathan Kearns is the likelihood of us having a source of federal dollars that is greater than CDBG money next year is still slim. So he gets a lot of the attention and a lot of the credit, and for like at least the third year in a row in the single audits. The single audit component is due separately, has a separate deadline of the end of March. But again, with staffing both, with Chris and SB and Company and the staffing here at the city, we were able to go ahead and incorporate it and get it all done at one time. But it is additional work. It's definitely additional work for Jonathan and all his group. The rest of the federal audits that we receive is typically smaller in nature than the $750,000.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
You know, again, thank the staff for getting this done in the era that we're operating under, and to get it done on time is a huge accomplishment. I'm kind of an old school guy. Remote work is not high on my list. I like to come to the office, but this staff is a perfect example of how remote home offices should work. And for what they were able to do, while also being able to keep staff safe was a great accomplishment for the department.
And SB and Company was willing to come on site to do the majority.
And
Because there's still a number of files, unbelievably, that, you know, you do not necessarily want to load through a portal or have out there, like HR records and loan documentations and stuff. So yes, we were grateful that they came on site for a majority of it.
And the fact that we were able to still operate without going into a deficit situation once the sledgehammer hit in March is a testament to the staff as well. So I thank them for that.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next we have preliminary agenda review. I'll go through this. If you have any questions, stop me. So we have 7 p.m. on December 15th, our regular session will call to order, have an invocation, pledge to the flag, new business, adoption of the rules and procedures. Just one thing to note on there, Robert's Rules of Order has released a 12th edition, and the rules that we went over previously had the 11th edition, so we're going to update that wording. We'll have announcements, rules of procedures. The meeting schedule for January will be January 5th, no meeting. January 12th and 19th, we'll have a work session at 4 p.m. And January 26th, we'll have regular session at 7 p.m. Citizen comments. We are only taking citizen comments by email, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so no in-person citizen comments. We'll approve the minutes for November 10th, November 17th, November 23rd, November 24th, 2020. For the consent agenda, we have the fire department's record management system, ESO, out of Austin, Texas, for $27,225.60. The police department replace a water source heat pump, mechanical room, MS Johnson, out of Hagerstown, for $10,325. Public Works, bulk gasoline purchase, Petroleum Traders Corporation, estimated cost not to exceed $441,244. Bulk diesel fuel purchase, Mansfield Oil Company, estimated cost not to exceed $441,244. Utilities, water, annual software support and services at the Wilson plant for SCADA, ABB Inc., for $67,100. Water and wastewater chemical purchase, water various vendors for $811,034, and wastewater various vendors for $433,912. Wastewater replacement ultraviolet bulbs and quart sleeves, $45,141.43. We have no unfinished business. Under new business, we have approval of a resolution, lease agreement for the City of Hagerstown property located at 36 North Potomac Street, the Yarn Shop. Approval of a resolution endorsing skate park plan. Approval of a resolution, McCleary Hill Solid Waste Collection Agreement. Approval of revision to the stormwater management plan. Acceptance of application and acceptance of grant funding from the Governor Maryland Strong Economic Recovery Initiative for a Main Street Hagerstown Business Stabilization Grant Program. Acceptance of the second allocation of CDBG CV funding. approval of golf course rates for 2021, approval of program open space application. We'll have city administrator comments, mayor and council comments, and we'll adjourn. Any questions? That was a lot of numbers to read. All right. Up next, we have the Greens and Hamilton Run Golf Course with Rodney, Mark, and Amy. And for the record, we are back on track, on time.
With me tonight are two employees that we're lucky to have. Mark Haddock, the manager of the Parks and Recreation area, and Amy Riley, our recreation coordinator. I just wanted to introduce them, especially to the new members of the council and the work that they do to keep the parks and recreation of our city, the parks in a beautiful condition, and recreation programs and events add to the quality of life for our citizens. At the Greens of Hamilton Run, basically we're recommending an increase to the greens fee rates and the season passes. The reasons for that are in my memo, but in our memo, most of them haven't been raised since 2012. We are lower priced compared to the other courses in the area, and Amy put together a thorough analysis of that that's attached to your memo. The course is in great condition, and Mark and the greenskeepers we have there have really improved what we have, and the play is just significantly higher. We think that people have kind of rediscovered our golf course, and it's we're believing that the play there will continue to remain high. The general fund subsidizes the golf course, as I put in the memo, but the good news is that the revenue this year is up 25% for golf. Rounds of golf, basically playing 9 holes of golf, has historically ran around 11,000. This year it's up to 16,000. On the season passes, we have about 34 of those that we issue. We have different rates depending if you live in the city or not, or if you're a senior citizen or not. So basically our recommendation is in the attachment to the memo to raise the greens fee rates and the passes. We think this could generate about another $25,000 if the play continues next year as it has this past year. So with that, do you have any questions or comments or questions for staff or I?
I'm okay with it, and Mark, I think you do it's fantastic out there. So great job on, everything that's improved there with the golf course. I do have a question, and I'm not sure if I've asked this before, but are we in the tee time book, it's like a guide for golf courses, such as a 9-hole course like ours? Do we advertise in that? We do? Because I would imagine, especially now with COVID, that a 9-hole golf course is like, our audience is really the people that want to play a quick 9 after work with their buddy, right? So we have our regulars, which is fantastic, but in order to get that audience, that tee time book would probably be very helpful in order to gain more interest in our course. So just a thought.
I mean, I've played it twice this year. It's in great condition. In fact, played the one tournament, and then I had some friends that wanted to play there instead of going to a couple of the other 18-hole courses that we would typically go to. And it's in, as good, if not better condition than most of the other places that we've been to. And so, I think the rates are justifiable. And I think, as I've said before, we're never going to get to 27,000 rounds in a year, which is what we need to break even.
That's right.
And if we did, the course would be unplayable because it would receive too much play, and people would get too frustrated because it only has 9 holes,
Right.
so it can only cater to so many people, cycling through a round. And so I think that 16 to 20,000 round is a very good area to be in. It puts us at less than $200,000 a year in subsidy. And in the grand scheme of things, again, to the taxpayers, that means to have that course and see it rather than it be something else. It's less than $12 a person or per household a year to basically, of your taxes go to have a facility like that. So I think that bodes well. And you're right, the keepers are doing a great job.
Well, I only have one suggestion, and that's at hole 4. You move that a little left, because when I'm on the tee box, my ball goes that way. So if you just move the hole over, or maybe the tee box a little more to the right, I'd be good. I'd be good.
I'm sure they'll get right on.
I think that's a good
It
suggestion.
just doesn't climb that hill all the way.
Are you guys okay with the price?
I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I echo everything that was said about you. You do a great job, and Amy, you too. Thank you.
Hole 4.
Next, oh, you're staying up here, program open space.
So I'll let Mark review our proposal, but just for some background, in Parks and Recreation, there's 2 sources of state funding that we have access to. The first is Community Parks and Playground, which is a program of the Department of Natural Resources, and it's just for that. It's for play equipment and amenities. We apply for that every year as a staff. Lately, we haven't been getting any money from that program, but we have been doing pretty well with Program Open Space, which is the second program. It's funded when you have a real estate transaction in the state. A little bit of the taxes of that transaction go into this program, and we've been getting $200,000 to $300,000 a year in Program Open Space funds. It's a 90% funded program and a 10% match by the city. It requires the elected body to endorse the plan. Then what happens, it all goes to the county along with all the other requests that they get, and then they funnel it down to what they believe should be the request that gets sent to the state. If you get through the county, you'll probably get it funded when it goes to the state. It's getting it through the county's process and competing against the other municipalities is the hardest part in this program. So Mark, you want to go over the proposal that we have for this year's requests?
For this year, one of our proposals is a skate park at the fairgrounds with the task force recommendations. And total project costs are around $550,000 with POS funds of about $150 and CDBG funds at about $375. Another one we're trying to acquire is a park playground equipment and amenities. What that amounts to is a city park in the south playground where we put the new swing sets and everything in last year to play equipment. We're trying to do a grass mound like the one up on Washington Street. There's going to be a bigger scale like the one there at the National Road Park. We're also going to try to get expression swings for the City Park North Playground, the Hager Park, the Helene Park. And these swings are like, they call them like a mommy and me, where the mom sits on one side and the child sits on the other, and they kind of face each other as they swing. A lot of people use them, and we're just trying to get more out there because they're so popular. Another would be like web climbers. They're more of a modern type climber, kind of like the one at National Road Park on Washington Street. And we'll have one of those for the Fairgrounds North Playground, the City Park North Playground, Helene Park, Mills Park, Pangbourne Park, and Wheaton Park. There's 6 total of them, and then we'd also like to apply for some money for some spinners, which are sort of like a web climber, but they also spin. There's one similar at the new playground in the south end of City Park, and we'd like to put one of them at the Fairgrounds Park North, Helene Park, Pangbourne Park. And also, we'd also like to apply for park amenities, which include picnic tables, park benches, trash receptacles for City Park, Fairgrounds Park, Hager Park, Pangbourne Park, and Wheaton Park. That would be the number 2 on your list, and then number 3 there is roof replacements. We're going to try to get some money for that. The stables roof, where we have the yard sale every year, the big long stables, we need to do some work on those roofs before they get too far gone. And then Hager Park, there's a garage there that has a roof that we've been patching together, which really needs completely replaced. And then there's a pavilion at Mills Park, which the roof on that one is having issues. The boards are popping up through the shingles, so we're going to remove that roof, put another one on, and use all metal so we don't have any maintenance then on those issues. That's kind of our 3 major things that we're going to ask for this year. So we're just trying to see where we end up on those lists.
So some new things and some taking care of what we have kind of things too. Do you have any questions?
Good with it?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we have the Stormwater Protection Program. Rodney.
I do too want to say about Mark and Amy that the light show in City Park, there's more lights this year, more hours, more songs. The amount of people that came this weekend was up 50% from last year because we have counters out there. So if you haven't been out to City Park to see the light show,
The police made me move my car after 3 hours.
That's because you fell asleep.
so they work really hard to put that together. On the stormwater program, my short presentation is we'd like to postpone this 2 more months. My little bit longer presentation is that, especially for the new members again, is that we are required to comply with Maryland State Department of Environment's what they call the MS4 permit, which is basically the permit that allows the stormwater runoff from the city to go into the waterways of the state of Maryland. And it's getting ever increasingly more strict about the quality of the runoff. Decades ago, all we worried about was more like flood control, but now it's the quality of the water that runs off. So we've been kind of pushed into a position where we had to create the stormwater protection program. And associated with that is a lot of retrofits of old stormwater structures to make them clean the water better, stream restoration so there's not as much erosion along stream banks, planting trees, and street sweeping is a huge component of this. And our two street sweepers do a significant portion of work to get us to where we need to be in this program. There's a fee associated with this program, and it's been discussed with the past administration. And it was supposed to go into place July 1st of this year. Because of the pandemic, it got pushed to January. And what I'm suggesting to you tonight is I think we need to push it 2 more months to March 1st, 2021. And there's 5 reasons. 5 reasons for that. Number one, the pandemic's obviously still here. I don't have to say anything more about that. Number 2, the administrative end of this and the billing. There's over 15,000 properties that we have to develop a invoice for the amount of assessment that gets charged to those. And we have all of them done except for about 600, but we could really use a little bit more time to keep working at that. The third is that the Stormwater Enterprise Fund, in this fiscal year, we hardly have spent any money. Because we knew all these things were happening, certainly the pandemic, we delayed a lot of the projects that are needed to get us to where we need to be to permit compliance. But for this year, we're going to be okay, even if we don't start charging the fee in March. Fourth, and maybe most important, is we think we can get the fee lower than what we proposed when it was approved this summer. There's a lot of things that have happened that are going to lower our costs. For example, Columbia Gas is going to be inspecting our storm drain systems for us because of some of the problems they've had across the nation with gas lines being in storm drains and sanitary sewers. They're going to be inspecting them for us, so we don't have to spend that money to do that, which was required by the permit. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars right there. Tree planting, we have an opportunity to have grants with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to plant about 30 acres of land that the water department controls down at Wilson Treatment Plant and out at the Brickner Plant, like areas that they're just mowing that we can plant trees on to get our credits. They don't have to pay for mowing, and it's all paid for by the DNR. Stream restorations, we're working with the Canaan Valley Institute to go after grants for some of the stream restorations, particularly at around Long Meadow and Mills Park. There's some significant erosion of that portion of Hamilton Run, and on our own golf course. And our 2 street sweepers, again, the amount that they pick up off the streets is a huge credit to this program. The program pays for the street sweeping, but that really advances the ball down the road of where we need to be on this. And then the fifth thing is we just still need to do more education. With the pandemic, we haven't done enough of that. We've had one public meeting back early last year, but we need to have more of that just to explain to the public what this program's about. So all that said, we'd like to push this back 2 more months, and I can come in sometime and give you more details or meet with the 2 new members if they want me to discuss this further.
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm okay with it.
That all sounded like pretty good news, so,
Yeah, we're hoping.
Yeah.
Keeping our fingers
5
crossed.
reasons. It's
thank
good.
you. All right. Lastly, we have the second allocation of CDBG Grant CARES Act funding.
Good afternoon. For newest members of the administration, my name is Jonathan Kearns. I'm part of Jill Thompson's team in Community and Economic Development, and one of my responsibilities is oversight of our Community Development Block Grant Program. This year has been a bit unique with the pandemic, and as part of the federal CARES Act legislation that was enacted in March, we received a special allocation of the Community Development Block Grant funding labeled CDBG CV. And that funding is meant to be used as typical block grant funding, but it has an extra restriction basically that requires the use of that funding has to be somehow tied to the pandemic response. So in essence, as I put in my memo, it's like regular CDBG funding, but more restrictive. So we have to have documentation that that funding is somehow preparing for, responding to, or preventing coronavirus. So the first round of the CDBG CV funding was announced again back in March, and the city at that time received $472,845 of CDBG CV funding, and the administration in July at that time approved allocations to nonprofit service providers, and that followed the trend of what most communities who received that funding had done throughout the spring and summer. And as laid out in my memo, the service providers here locally that received that funding was the Washington County Community Action Council for housing stability. That was meant to be rent assistance or mortgage assistance for households that were impacted by the pandemic. It was also provided to Horizon Goodwill in partnership with Washington County Community Action Council. That was meant to target maybe more homeless prevention and crisis assistance for families maybe experiencing homelessness. Also, funding was provided to the Washington County Community Action Council for food resources, also to the Washington County Commission on Aging for food resources, and then also to Girls Incorporated for food resources. In the memo, I had provided some of the data on how how the expenditures have looked for each of those organizations. Do have some updated data that came in over the past few days after my memo was written. The Community Action Council had received $350,245 for their housing stability program, and they've spent to date $23,374. They have been impacted also by, I think, other funding that had come in during the summer, some from the county, some from other federal sources. And in conversations with Jordy Newman, I believe they spent roughly $460,000 of other funding that had come in because maybe there was some time restrictions on that funding. So I think at least what that says to me is there is a demand for the housing stability type assistance out there. The spending for our CDBG CV funding for that programming has been somewhat delayed due to the other funding sources. He believes that based on his estimation, the rest of our CDBG CV funding from that first phase would be used up probably by March or April of next year. The Community Action Council in part...
John, while we're here, so they've spent to date $476,000 basically.
Approximately.
Of other monies aside from the $350 that.
Correct.
We forwarded to them. Okay. Here's my problem. I would like to understand the parameters when someone goes to them for assistance. Because I've had people who have emailed me, who I've directed to them, and never got assistance. But if you're telling me they've only spent 7% of the money that we gave them, there's money available, you know, what are these people who aren't getting the assistance they're seeking? You know, what are they not, why are they not qualifying?
I would have to follow up with Jordy.
Right,
Newman
and
to get that info.
and maybe
We-
Jordy comes in and explains what the parameters are so people actually understand that.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Well, there are income restrictions, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, for the CDBG CV funding, there are income restrictions based upon the Community Development Block Grant, low to moderate income benefit. It's 80% of the area median or lower income as a household that would qualify. For the CDBG CV funding, they also then have to provide proof that they've had impact from the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right, people who have lost their jobs, who can't pay their mortgage or can't pay their rent, have went for assistance and been turned down. So if you lost your job, that's pretty much says you don't have any income, you know, let alone, you know, but I mean, I can't wrap my head around why people who are in this community who have sought help and not been able to get it, when we have 93% of the money that we forwarded them still there, that can be used.
Sure, and we can work with Jordy to see if he could come in to provide a better explanation on
I'd
those
appreciate
detailed,
that,
detailed cases.
Yeah, and for the people to understand that.
Yes. The housing stability through the Goodwill Short-Term Housing Initiative, they've spent an additional $9,138 since my memo, so that brings their total to $22,745. The Community Action Council Food Resources Program for their food pantry, they spent an additional $8,739, bringing their total to $9,775 for the term. Washington County Commission on Aging had exhausted their funding in the fall. The total was $17,300, and Girls Inc.'s his total has not changed since what was in the memo.
You know, it did strike me a little bit when I read the memo, you know, in my prior life as a county commissioner and being the liaison to the Commission on Aging for a number of years, it was very apparent to me that there were a clear, you know, senior population within the community that were constantly seeking food resources, food security. And I say that, you know, when and it's funny because back in 2009 when we did the senior center survey, the county did that, you know, 83% of all of the responses provided during that survey time were seniors saying, you know, we want additional food sites, we want additional food-related activities, we want additional food, you know, resources. And so I look at this and, you know, the Commission on Aging, while it's not a big sum of money, expended that money, and I'm guessing they probably expended it pretty quick. And so to me, I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we are cognizant that, you know, that necessity within, you know, our senior community is clearly and glaringly apparent and needed.
So more money should be allocated to them.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at this time, that's what we're here tonight, is to discuss moving forward with the second allocation that has been provided to the city. It was announced at a later date. It was part of the original legislation through the CARES Act in March, but there was formula calculations that would come at a later date based upon how that funding was developed through the Housing and Urban Development and legislators. So our second allocation was announced in September in the amount of $274,365. And we had an initial discussion with the previous administration in October on that allocation. There was a discussion about possibly looking at a public facility, like a downtown restroom facility, for maybe the downtown population. And we had looked into that with our HUD representative, and based upon our discussions with HUD and the parameters of the CDBG CV funding, it does not appear to be an eligible use of the CDBG CV funding for that type of initiative. Again, what we've seen throughout the country and what we had did through the first round, that was the mostly typical use of the CDBG CV funding for social service type uses for housing stability and food resources. There are certainly jurisdictions who've done some other things, maybe with direct homeless resources. There's been some business assistance programming, but again, that can be pretty restrictive based on the CDBG regulations. So at this time, what we had put in the memorandum is some options to consider moving forward. We could distribute the funding to the current recipients of the original allocation of CDBG CV funding, but that could be changed based upon what is the demand. We don't have to necessarily provide them all the same amount of funding in that same proportion as the first go-around. It could be, as what Councilman Alshire just mentioned, maybe if there's more demand for concerns for senior food resources, that could be shifted. We could open up a new application process to nonprofits, again, basically starting the process over, having an application period of 2 to 3 weeks to see if there's any call for other demand or funding, and then move forward with decisions of allocation from there. We did look into the option that we could potentially hold off on any decisions to see if there's future impacts over the next few months for the funding, to see if there's other issues that come up or arise that would require some type of funding. We always like, with federal funding, to try to get the plans rolling as soon as possible, so we're here to take direction on next steps as requested by you.
I would be more inclined to, for the second option, simply because things have changed, just like Councilman Alshire had mentioned. I don't know, there's been a lot of food resources outreach. I think that we've all seen a lot of, you know, the big trucks and such that are all around the county. So although there are still probably need, I'm not sure if it's the same exact need. I think that there's a lot of homelessness and the evictions and things like that that will be occurring that we don't know the demand. It's not the same as it was when we first were allocated. So I'd be more inclined with the second option to open up the process again to understand where the need is. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at option 2 as well. I will add to that. I do share Councilmember Brucci's same question, and now that you've explained it, you know, I think that makes it a little better. But I definitely am curious, and certainly nothing against Jordy and the CAC, but I just feel like this money sort of being sent in a manner of time is of the essence. And so I want to make sure that, one, you know, that we're using it in that, you know, immediacy of a manner, and number 2, that it's going to folks in this community, you know, that currently, you know, have that need. And so we've doled that money out. I'm assuming there is no period. In other words, I hear you saying, you know, well, talk to the organization, and they're going to have it all gone by March. But when I look at that big chunk of 350 and see that, you know, less than 10% of it's gone so far, I just want to make sure that March isn't, you know, June or July, or, you know what I mean, and it's still sitting there, and then we're seeing and experiencing and hearing from folks that have need and now don't have access to the funding because we've provided it to an organization that they just don't fit into, you know, the pegs of, and we don't have that ability to recall that funding so that we can redirect it to other entities that you know, may provide the pegs that those other people we didn't think about do fit into. So.
You guys good with B?
Option 2? Yes.
Option 2. Option B. You're good with that?
No.
Oh, she's good.
I'm
All right.
good, I'm
So
sorry.
we'll move forward with option 2. We'll do an application process again to seek new applications for this funding. And in the meantime, we can work with Jordy Newman to maybe have him provide us an update face-to-face so they can directly explain the situations where maybe funding was not able to be provided, so.
Yeah, I'd
You
love
know,
to.
here's my problem. You know, I hear from these folks, and it's not like one or two, it's a plethora of people. But I look at this and I realize that this money is sent out to help people who are in need, okay? I don't really think that the powers that be that sends this money out understands that in this depressed economy here, the people who are associated under these guidelines are increasing, you know, but, you know, picking and choosing because, you know, someone's income is $500 more than what falls in the parameters, first off, is ridiculous, but, you know, it's the same thing as saying you can't use these funds to pay for a municipal electric account or something like that. That just makes no sense. You know, I mean, people who are hurting, who have city light, who are behind their light bill, can't use these funds to help keep their lights on because we're a municipal electric company and we're not a private entity, even though it's a, you know, an enterprise fund. That's its own fund. But, I mean, some of this, pardon me, is just friggin' ridiculous.
It can be frustrating. I know as Chris Schumann, or Chris Lehman, not Schumann, he's our IT guy. Chris Lehman with the audit discussion earlier had mentioned this funding had come out, and I think there was a lot of rules that were still being developed, and the funding was pushed out and saying, we need you to get this funding out into the communities to assist, but oh wait, we don't even know quite what all the parameters are yet. So there's
just
definitely some staff frustrations,
Better
very
to
similar
ask
to what you've
forgiveness
said.
than permission.
Yeah, I think the difficulty for me would be I think we provide it to the right organization, right? We get it to CAC because they're sort of a good umbrella entity to do that with. I just would be disappointed if what I heard was it was placed into the mechanisms of operations that the organization typically applies the parameters to of their annual funding. In other words, I guess I just see the funding as different. This was like, you know, a federal process saying, hey, we understand that issues are coming. Here's a stopgap right now while we figure some stuff out. I would just hope that whatever went out in that stopgap didn't sort of get put in the parameters of the regular annual programs that they otherwise provide anyway, because I just don't envision, and I haven't envisioned that that's what that funding would be for. You know what I mean? To me, it would be of a broader sense, of a more immediate nature, not, hey, you know, here's the file, paperwork, here's what we typically do, here's how we typically operate. To me, that's a whole separate.
Here's a square peg, put it in a square hole. Right,
amount.
doesn't work, right.
We'll definitely work with Jordy to get an update and get some answers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
City Administrator?
Just a couple of things, Mayor. I know, especially for the new members, but for all of you, I know we've thrown a lot of stuff at you all the last few weeks.
You think?
Please don't hesitate to reach out and use me as a conduit. If you have questions, hook you up with the staff that's going to give you some answers. You know, if it's just an answer to one thing, or you want to understand better a process that we do, whatever time you would need to feel comfortable with that information, especially as you see things coming up on draft agendas that you get emails for, don't hesitate to reach out, and any of us can help you get that information. And obviously it goes, especially for the both of you that are new to this, but for everybody else to reach out. That the old pros know what they're doing. And then lastly, I want to thank again the Parks Department for the Christmas lights at City Park. Absolutely an outstanding amenity we have, especially in the days of social distancing and being able to have some enjoyment, take your family out. And I know we sit in one car and my grandkids sit in another car and enjoy the lights. And the amount of traffic out there has definitely increased from last year. And they didn't even do everything that they could have done this year, just simply because of staff, and we had some COVID issues with staff that we had to take care of. But if you have an opportunity, anyone that's listening, go out there and take a look at it. You'll enjoy it. I think there's 7 or 8 songs, which are 5 more than I think we had last year. And they have the gazebo lit that's synchronized to the music this year, so it's just a really cool experience. And I can't thank Mark Haddock, Scott Smoot, and the guys and girls out there at the City Park and in the Parks Department for putting this effort into it. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Kristen?
I'm not gonna have to go first every time.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking the same thing. It
Yes,
just
you
doesn't seem
can. He
fair,
can go
does
first
it?
every time.
All right. You're like, you will start on the right every time.
Start picking a number.
I want to go last.
A couple of things. One is if you could let me know when you're gonna be there. I haven't seen the lights yet, but I'd like to sit in a different car too.
Yeah,
Than the kids. You know,
I prefer that actually.
That would be real,
That'd be relaxing.
yeah, no wonder you get to sit and relax. It's really nice. So, or at least just take the boys. I have two items, really. The first is, and I know, maybe I should have said more last week, and I didn't, and that's just the way it is. And so I was sort of processing it, I think last week, and I think that this drives my position on the specific matter even more so, was the funding for the Main Street districts, and so I'm just gonna try and say it as briefly as possible, and I've expressed it to some of the other members of Mayor and Council and staff since, but I firmly and truly believe that the Main Street funding is for our for-profit businesses in our Main Street area that have come under harder times from the pandemic. And, seeing even tonight that now we're getting additional funding for nonprofits, that's sort of another set aside of money. I'm real hard pressed when we're saying, hey, we've got in addition to CDBG, we got this other CDBG funding. And I'm gonna say it as honestly as I possibly can. And I'm for the skate park, so I support that. But I can't support that item knowing that I've got an additional 274 that's not gonna be available for applications for nonprofit. We're spending CDBG funding that we already have on a community amenity, rather than community need, and then have to turn to the limited funding that we may be getting through CARES through the state for Main Street, and say, you know what, for-profit businesses that are hurting in that area, we're going to take that, we're going to take a portion of that away as well. It just doesn't sit with me, and so next week when we do have this discussion, I'm just going to be flat out, I'd have to abstain on endorsing the skate park, simply because you put the item above the other, which is the acceptance of the application. And for me, my conscience would have to figure out where I would be on that item before I could support the other. And that would be the only reason for that. So that's my 2 cents on that item, after being able to sort of sit and process it for some time, and try to compartmentalize, where I feel it's appropriate for the various fundings that we do have and do receive to go. The second item that I have this evening, and I made comment of this on the media page, is the Herald article, that has the headline, Hagerstown to continue stadium talks despite the loss of the Suns' national affiliation. To be very honest, and I understand the dynamic, with courtesy to the reporter here, that they don't write the headlines, the Herald does, and they simply write the articles. But that headline was disingenuous at best to the public. I think that there's some movement on how that story is being delivered to the public that I think that is less than on the level by that entity. And so I want to make sure that the citizens are aware. Hagerstown, if it means this body, hasn't taken any position. We haven't had any discussion. We barely had a chance to sort of catch our breath on the number of sort of pivotal and priority items that we have right out of the gate here in our first couple of meetings. And so I would appreciate, us being able to deliver the story to the public in a fair and honest manner, rather than headlines like this that deliver it in a manner that appears to benefit the parties potentially telling the story. And that's all I'll say to that. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Ritchie.
All right, so, in rebuttal to what Kristen just said, I believe the headline wasn't about Hagerstown government. I believe it was about Hagerstown as a community, but that's how I viewed it. You know, I realize these are crazy times with COVID. I understand it completely, and, you know, I'm gonna be as respectful as possible while I go through this. But there are three types of people, three groups of individuals. We got your COVID conspiracy people who believe that they don't believe in it at all. They just believe it's all a hoax. Okay, you have that group. Then you have the COVID realistic people. And these are people who care and protect, but go ahead and live their life, all right, as best they can, while still trying to adhere to these unrealistic regulations that have been put on people over the last year. Then you have the COVID hysterical people. And these are the people who will call the Maryland State Police Compliance Office on someone who's not wearing a mask, on stage acting. These individuals actually need to stay in a bunker until a worldwide cure is found, so that the rest of us can go on with life. The first group of people don't shame others. The second group of people, the realists, don't shame others. The COVID hysterical people shame all those who don't believe like them. And that's a problem. And it's a problem for a lot of small businesses. So please, if you're COVID hysterical, please do everybody a favor and just protect yourself and your family as best you can, and let everybody else go on living life. That's it.
Councilwoman Burnett.
Hopefully, I've been told no one can hear me on this thing, but I just want to thank all the organizations and businesses that have been putting a lot of giveaways this year, especially in these hard times. I can't keep up with sharing so many good stories about how people are, using their own money and their own time and giving away coats and food. This past weekend, we had Housing Authority do a food drive. We have the city giving out hams, Boys and Girls Club giving out coats. So I just want to thank all the organizations and businesses that have been doing really a good job of just helping each other out. And I'm just glad to see that, we can still support one another. So, comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Martinez.
So the last week, I've taken a lot of different community calls, a lot of death. There's a lot of people with sick parents, a lot of people with sick family members. And I just wanted to encourage everybody that's listening to be kind to each other. Everybody's going through something. So just be encouraged and be kind. And definitely it's the holidays. So this is a time where most people are going through something anyway, whether it be depression or missing their family. And now we're in a pandemic. The list of priorities are different for all of us, and they're different for us, whether culturally, community, region-wise. So the only thing that we can do and be in control of is giving some hope away. So just be encouraged and give some hope away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say something, don't I? Now that everyone else did.
No, you don't.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. You're lucky. You're welcome.
Yeah, let's get comfortable.
Guys, so what in the heck? I just want to piggyback off of what Scott said and thank Wes and the production team and Ryan Smetzer, who is probably the happiest, Christmas, jolliest person on Facebook Live. So for all of us that didn't get to go to City Park and watch Mayor Keller and the Santa Claus and the reading, great job. I know it's really difficult to do something like that virtually. It's a new experience. Hopefully we never have to do it again, but really hats off to hopefully to include all of the community as you did. So really appreciate it. That's it.
I can't wait to take Bo out to the park. I truly can.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I just have two things. One, I wanted to give a shout out to staff that helped the yarn shop. They were part of the Hamilton building that collapsed. And I just saw they posted on Facebook today that they are back open for business at the engine room. So thank you to everyone who made that possible and helped them be open for the holidays. And then the only other thing was I wanted to address the picture that Herald Mail had posted from our oath of office that showed us as a group. It's been subject to some comments in the Herald Mail feedback section that they print every day, as well as on Facebook. During the Pledge of Allegiance, and I posted the video online, I know Councilmember McIntyre did as well, you can see that all four of us women have our hands on our hearts during the Pledge of Allegiance. Unfortunately, when the picture was taken, it was either prior to the pledge starting or after the pledge. So Councilmember Brucci and Councilmember Alshire still had their hands on their hearts, and we did not. So unfortunately, we've been pretty scrutinized heavily, people calling us anti-American, anti-flag, pieces of you-know-what, saying we should be removed from office. So I just wanted to make it clear it was a very unfortunately timed picture. I understand the frustration if you saw it and thought we didn't have our hands on our hearts on the Pledge of Allegiance, but we absolutely did. So I appreciate the people who did remove their posts that were very negative toward us. I know there are still some out there, and Herald Mail, as of today, is still printing them in the feedback section. But I just wanted to clarify that because I think it's important. It did reflect very negatively on the four of us, and thankfully it wasn't true. So.
And I put on that one post that was up, I posted a video also, and I told him, I said, go to 503, and you'll see that Mr. Alshire and I put our hands on our heart when the flag was coming in, saluting the flag as it's posted, as it's presented. When the pledge started, you guys all had your hand over your heart, It's not required that you salute the flag as it comes in. It's not mandatory. It's just what we chose to do when the flag came in. And, everybody can do it. Nobody has to do it. But you guys definitely had your hands over your heart during the pledge of the flag.
Right.
And I pointed that out, and so.
Yeah, understood, but just know that it didn't come from a place of disrespect. And what we were accused of doing is absolutely not what happened. So I would appreciate if Herald Mail could help us clarify that, and I know we're trying our best to do that as well. And
Next week.
What?
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Decker, great to have you along this evening. We actually made up a lot of ground in that meeting. Got a late start today because of the executive session that ran long, but then we really picked it up during the work session and concluded with the CDBG CV funding discussion with Jonathan Kearns, who joins me now, the Community Development Manager. Jonathan, tell me a little bit about this for anyone who perhaps either joined the meeting late or did not hear the discussion. Just first, give me a little background on this second allocation of funds.
Sure. So the Federal CARES Act legislation that was passed in March provided CDBG entitlement jurisdictions such as Hagerstown an additional special allocation of community development block grant funding known as CDBG CV funding. So again, our annual allocation of CDBG funding is something that is standard each year. And there's been times in the past through maybe economic recovery or disaster relief, sometimes special CDBG funding is allocated to jurisdictions, and that's the case we have here. So the CARES Act funding provided initially the city of Hagerstown $472,874 in CDBG CV funding back in March, and that funding was allocated to our social service providers, nonprofit social service providers in July. And when the initial CARES Act funding legislation was passed, it said a second allocation of the CDBG CV funding would be coming further down the road. That's now the case. In September, it was announced that $274,365 of CDBG CV funding would be coming in a second allocation to the city of Hagerstown, and we're now working with the city council on the next steps to allocate that funding for use in the community. And All of that funding still comes with the same CDBG regulations as standard CDBG funding. The CV funding, the special CDBG CV funding, has an additional requirement that it has to be directly related to coronavirus response or impact from the pandemic. So as we've discussed this evening, it's like CDBG funds, but in essence, it's more restrictive because it comes with additional regulations and additional requirements and how that funding is used.
And the first time around, we had 5 recipients of that funding, as was outlined during the meeting tonight. And now the council has provided direction saying, let's start over with this second allocation, meaning let's not give the money to the same agencies and organizations potentially as we did the first time, but let's have everyone have an opportunity once again to apply. And we'll go through that process and then decide on who gets the money, how much they get, and all of that. And then some of the discussion tonight, things that you couldn't answer, as brought up by Councilmember Brucci, was, okay, well, why do people go to CDC and then they're turned away? And again, as you stated, I mean, one of the key things here is just how difficult it is to get this particular money, given all of the restrictions that apply to it. So once this money is handed over by the city to one of these organizations, it's sort of up to them then to abide by the guidelines, depending upon those who come in and apply for that funding as to whether they receive it. So then the suggestion was to have Jordy Newman from CAC come in and perhaps address mayor and council on some of those particular issues.
Yes, we'll definitely work with Jordy to answer those questions for the council members that brought those items up. Certainly good questions, and make sure that obviously anyone who's eligible for that funding is able to receive it through the organizations that are providing those services. And to clarify, the current organizations who receive the initial allocation of CDBG CV funding would be eligible to apply for the second allocation. Again, we will be providing an announcement to our nonprofit social service providers in the city of Hagerstown. For the providers who provide services directly to city of Hagerstown citizens, they'll be able to apply and provide the description of how they would use those funds. Again, making sure with the previous round of CDBG CV funding, making sure they're complying with all those regulations that have been tied to the special allocation of CDBG CV funding.
Yeah, and this is good news in a number of ways because certainly the need is still there. And the first time around, the request that came in exceeded the amount of money that was available. So it is good to have a second allocation out there. And as you said, this doesn't preclude anyone, whether you received money the first time, didn't receive money the first time, from applying for this particular allocation.
Correct, and I would say when we use the term anyone, it's nonprofit, social service organizations who would be permitted to directly apply.
See that's where your CDBG background comes in because of all of those regulations, all those guidelines, all of those restrictions. So yeah, you got me on that, no question about it. And as far as nonprofits applying, where should they look for this? How far down the line are we away from opening up this new application process?
Well, we will work over the next few business days. I'd say by next week at this time, we'll work to have an announcement on our website, and the application information is all available through our website. So that's obviously www.hagerstownmd.org, but it would be the Department of Community and Economic Development webpage within our overall city website that will have all that information. The application materials are all provided online, and they could contact me directly at the Department of Community and Economic Development or Lauren Metz, our Planning and Outreach Coordinator.
Excellent, Jonathan. Thank you very much for the information. And I'm going to bring in Director of Finance now, Michelle Hepburn. She referenced Jonathan a little bit in her presentation tonight, so this is almost the perfect segue. We go backwards a little bit in terms of the way that items were on the agenda tonight. Michelle, thanks for joining me. What is it that as a city taxpayer, that what we got tonight in terms of this presentation of this audit what is it that the layperson, that city taxpayer should take away from what was presented?
So thank you for the invite, and yes, it was a perfect segue. I think one of the things and one of the items that is most difficult to comprehend, aside from all the technical language that is accounting, because let's face it, it is its own language, we all appreciate and understand that, is we all start talking in terms like net position and governmental activities and business types, and say things like the city has 203 million in net position. I think to break it down in its most simplistic form is that, yes, we have a number of funds, and some of our funds are considered governmental. The majority of everything in the governmental fund is covered by taxpayer dollars. Either real estate or personal property makes up about 68% of all our revenue source. And on business type funds, it's all of our utilities. So basically our charges for services. Think electric, water, wastewater, even golf. When you go to play golf, the majority of what is covered there is what you're paying to pay for that service. So what the audit does, and it should bring great comfort to everybody, is that we as a governmental agency have not only agreed and comply with annual requirements for an independent audit, meaning nobody necessarily affiliated here at the city, nobody gets special provisions to be the contractor. There's nothing that I could do or say, or Scott or any of our current administration or past administration could do that would influence the impact and the effect of this audit. They literally come in and they look at the numbers. They look at the policies. They look at our computer systems and how we are doing things, procedures, processes. And when they come back and say clean audit, meaning that, there is just all this criteria out there. Again, I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but
Sure.
all this criteria, and they have literally looked at a great majority of transactions, looked at the dollars, and have come back and said, hey, there is nothing that we see that does not meet regulations and actually is effective, and you heard unmodified. It is the cleanest, best result that we could possibly have. So actually that should bring peace of mind, and it should show and just reiterate that what we are doing with our policies and what we show and reflect in these statements is really everything that there is to show and reflect.
And I think when people think about the budget right now, one of those numbers that sticks in their head is the deficit that we're sort of projecting for the upcoming fiscal year, which is totally separate from what we discussed today, certainly.
Absolutely.
But when you look at that and you consider where we've been over the last 9 months or
Yes.
so, and this audit has come back clean, and once again, the finance department is award-winning and continues to do what the finance department has done for so long and done so well, and congratulations on that, I must say, because that is a ton of work to begin with. But what I'm getting at is when you look at where we're headed here, and we don't know that for sure. I mean, we're projecting, but we don't know for sure. When we're in this position that we're in the audit that's taken place, I'll get there eventually with my question.
It's all good.
Is that, was anything done differently this past year as it relates to the audit itself, or are those steps always the same regardless? I mean, those numbers come in, they're sort of plugged in, they look at the way that, your processes are done and the adherence to all of the guidelines and things of that nature. Was anything different with this audit at all?
Right, so yes and no. So the audits are all basically the same. They have to hit every single area. But for instance, 1 year they're going to come in and the city has invested in CDs. And what they might do is hit every single CD that we own, reach out to every single bank entity that we have one with, which is a very, very long, exhaustive list. So sometimes they concentrate and focus on that. Sometimes they focus on things like, which is where we spend a lot of time, and I should just take a moment to take a step back, because first they will come in the spring and early summer, and they do what is considered an internal control testing. So they spend a week, and typically they spend it with accounting, human resources, and customer service / billing. And what they do there is they literally trace, they pick randomly several different weeks throughout the year, and then go to payroll and say, okay, here's all the weeks, give us the listing of employees, here's every employee, and we want to see start to finish. So they look at the electronic time card down to their human resources record, to the direct deposit or payroll check that we've processed back to the bank. Where they focus, and again, that was in late spring, early summer. So a lot of time was spent, again, they worked through all these processes, but they added a whole additional. Tell us what you're doing differently. Tell us if you've got different procedures that you've put in place to handle and deal with the COVID pandemic and the impacts that you're seeing. And so one of the things I think that the focus was a little bit more heavy on was the whole area around all of our, and it's a topic that we've talked about extensively, is our outstanding receivables and our outstanding bills. Because in a normal year, most governmental agencies have things that if you issue the bill and it doesn't get paid, like maybe a water bill, you could add it to a tax lien and move on. And there's not huge uncertainty or great risk in a very small likelihood that something isn't going to be collectible. That definitely was changed this time, and it's reflected in our statements. It was reflected in our processes. But they did, want to know everything that we had put in place, what was being handled differently, how we were meeting, down to, as a management team, did we meet more often? What did we have in place? Did we adopt certain protocol? Had already researched and knew that, our building was closed momentarily, but that we were one of the few agencies that was reopened to the public. And how did we handle that? And what did we do? They also this year took an extra look at our information technology and our structure there, because not specifically related to the pandemic, but it has definitely been a year that there's more information out there about cyber security and safety in your computer systems, and knowing that more people were working remotely. How were we handling that, and what procedures and safety protocols do we have in place? Because it is all about safety protocols at the end of the day.
Wow. Well,
in one form or another.
Well, now I understand why the first word is comprehensive, because that's about as comprehensive as it gets. Michelle, again, congratulations on the clean audit.
Thank you.
Presentation. Put that behind us, at least for a little bit,
Yes.
although I think it's always a work in progress as every day goes by. So
Yes.
again, I know that's something where, you're proud of that for the time being, but
Extremely proud of that.
always looking forward to the next one, though. because
It's
can't.
perfect segue, and
can't
I will let this in, because I know it's been a very long day, and I appreciate the time. But perfect segue, because absolutely, he mentioned about the audit, but the comprehensive annual financial report, again, is voluntary. But it has the same deadlines if we're going to participate in that program. And what that allows us to do is be even more transparent and provide additional disclosures and information. Right. And none of this, absolutely none, would be remotely possible without my terrific team and my accounting and budget manager, Brooke Garver. In fact, little sneak peek, I'm very excited. I'm very proud and happy to say that we had this clean audit and no issues, but I'm even more excited to say that there is another acronym, PAFR, called Popular Annual Financial Report. For everybody else who doesn't want to look at like a 100-page document or even attempt to decipher what any of all that secret code meant when Chris was talking about the audit protocols. And it's going to be a very shortened document, like 12 to 13 pages, more user-friendly, more charts, hopefully less tedious for a person to enjoy. And the city of Hagerstown hasn't been able to produce that since 2010, calendar 2010. And my team, and again, Brooke Garver, she has been spending all kinds of hours getting it ready and done. So we're very excited again, because we're in the midst of that, we're working on fiscal year 20 here, I'm working on fiscal year 21 budget adjustments, but I've also geared up for fiscal year 22 budget, so juggling 3 fiscal years gets a little confusing in the month of December, but happy that this is behind us for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, you always have so many balls in the air, and I just learned what CAFR meant, so now PAFR, so there's more to come. Stay tuned. Thanks again, Michelle. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jonathan Kearns, too, and thanks to all of you for watching. As we said, coming up, we are going to do this on a more regular basis. As a matter of fact, we'll try to have a council wrap for you after each and every work session. The next work session won't be until January the 12th, though, so I can say, see you next year. Thanks for watching tonight, and until then, happy holidays from the city of Hagerstown.